friends, friends of film, and everyone in between. Welcome to the Film Folklore Podcast. I am Jed Props, and I am joined today by Justin Sound.
Hello.
And Zoe Props.
Hello.
Chris could not be here. This is a totally different recording time from last week's episode, and Chris just once again couldn't make it. Where is Chris?
Chris had a crazy Fawlty Towers series of events. He stubbed his toe, and then he fell onto a chair, and then was catapulted out the window, where he then fell into more manure. Can you believe it?
2 weeks in a row.
So he's got the full cast on his body. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where all their arms are up, and they only have holes in their mouth, nose, and eyes.
I can only hope that next week he doesn't complete the manure trifecta.
You never know. You never know.
Well, we'll know if he doesn't make it.
So, yeah, poor bastard.
Sorry, what were you going to say, Justin?
Pray for Chris.
Is he getting in different kinds of manure?
I don't know. I don't know if this has just been a big pile outside of his house for the last week
So
that has not been
where
has
he's
not
at,
been
if we can
moved
determine if
or
it's like
different.
Right.
If it's like a cow field or
Yeah.
Or it's technically just a pile of fertilizer.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see.
Kind of thing.
Just trying to find him.
Yeah.
So I'm excited because we're starting our new series today that we had alluded to at the closing of Rust. I'm still not 100% satisfied with the title. Right now, I'm just calling it Safety on Set, but we'll try to come up with something better. I should have polled y'all. That's what I should have done.
Yeah. You shoulda.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. If this releases and it's got something better, then you'll know we figured it out.
It might be the acronym that's throwing it off. The
Yeah.
SOS.
Yeah, that's true. Why is everybody thinking I need help?
Well.
So, I don't know a better way to make the segue happen than to cover what we're going to do today, and that is the 1994 Brandon Lee tragedy that is The Crow. And we talked a little bit before we started the show, but have you all seen The Crow?
No.
Not shocking. And Justin, you said you had seen it.
I have seen it. It's probably been at least 15 years.
Okay. Yeah. I just watched it yesterday while I was finishing up this episode, and it brought back a lot of nostalgia. I was 15 when this movie came out. I loved the soundtrack at the time. It was very of the era. And Brandon Lee was kind of an up and comer. There was a movie called Ricochet. It was an action movie I remember enjoying. I don't know how it holds up, but anything about the tragedy that occurred with the shooting of the movie?
Yeah, no. I know that happened. I think it was something like the gun wasn't cleaned and there was still shit in there, and he got shot in the face or something like that. Sorry, this is what I.
No. That's exactly what I wanted you to say, because I want to go off of memory and what we had heard before we get into the.
Yeah, that's what I know. Yeah, I know that it's a goth cult classic, and there wasn't a bullet in, but there was pieces or something because it wasn't cleaned properly. Is what I know, or what I believe to be true.
Okay. And Justin?
Well, growing up, I always heard it was a murder. There
was
and
conspiracy.
I kind of always believed that too growing up, just because I didn't really hear anything else and I didn't know anything about how something like that is supposed to go down.
Right.
So, and I think I did eventually, when I get older, probably more skeptically read or hear that it was more along the lines of a mistake made with the actual process, such as something not getting cleaned properly, or maybe I heard something along the lines of it was a blank, but shrapnel, still flew far enough to where it,
Yeah, and I had heard similar as well, because this, especially in props, this is one of those. Almost I guess I would call it a departmental bedtime story of sorts, where it's a tale of morals, kind of thing,
Yeah.
a cautionary tale. That's what I'm trying to say. And I had always heard similar things. I had heard that the guns were being passed off between units and they weren't getting properly cleaned, and that there was some debris that turned into a projectile that ended up killing him, I think is more or less the way that I had heard it.
Yeah.
And there are truths to all of this, which is why we all have heard similar things. And kind of like anything else, the moment, this happens to me practically everything I research on this, is that I realize, oh, I was A, wrong, B, telling wrong information.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the game of telephone that a lot of this stuff becomes. And maybe it's just a good lesson for anybody that maybe fact check yourself before you go rampantly talking about something as fact.
Triggity check yourself.
Yeah. Because we know
before you wreck yourself. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So wait, how old are you?
17.
Yeah. Right. So we're going to get into it. And I wish Chris was here because, again, this is not only a good, to have an 80s opinion, but there's so much that parallels from this to almost 30 years later to the Rust tragedy. And y'all will see it when we get into it. But what better place to start than the beginning? So we'll start there. So a brief background on The Crow. If you've never seen it, it's a sort of goth superhero R-rated revenge story set in Detroit, beginning on Devil's Night, which I had never heard of Devil's Night until I saw The Crow as a teenager. Did y'all know, or do you know what Devil's Night is?
October 1st, or what is that? I have no idea.
It's basically, I believe it's the night before Halloween. And I don't know, and anyone feel free to write or use our call-in number we don't have. But it's it's either a Detroit specific thing or there is some kind of specific holiday lore to it or something in the past. That part I don't know, and I didn't bother to look up. But Detroit specifically had a bad reputation on Devil's Night of actually committing vandalism and arson and things like that. It was basically an excuse for assholes to go fuck up the city.
Cool.
Yeah, great. Yeah, they were probably all 16. But
Sounds like The Purge.
Yeah, it's like The Purge, but not directed towards people.
Yeah.
Property.
Yeah, exactly. So a little fun trivia on that later, so just put a pin in it. But the idea is that Brandon Lee stars as a rocker musician named Eric Draven, who returns to his apartment one evening, such as Devil's Night, to find his fiancée brutally attacked by a local gang, and they are subsequently both murdered. A year later, he is summoned from the dead, given powers, exacts revenge, hijinks ensue, Bob's your uncle. So that's what The Crow is in a nutshell. It's originally based off of a comic book. It now is a franchise. There's multiple iterations of it. I haven't seen the newest one, but if it's anything like all the other sequels and revamps, they're not good. I do have a soft spot for the original, but yeah, it was a diminishing return on the anyways. So producer Jeff Most is his name. Producer Jeff Most discovered James O'Barr's comic The Crow and immediately was enamored with the story. He got O'Barr on board and the project was underway. Brandon Lee, son of martial arts legend Bruce Lee, if y'all hadn't figured that one out, was tapped to play the lead. You could say that Brandon was a bit of an up-and-comer because he was starting to see a good momentum of success in the early 90s. I'd mentioned Ricochet was a action movie I remember enjoying that he was in. And he was only 28 years old when he would go on to star in what is his biggest and most successful production to date, and unfortunately, he would not be alive to see it to fruition. So another thing I didn't know, the production was in Wilmington, North Carolina, which we have talked about for its 90s heydays. And interestingly, art department did a great job. I thought it was in Detroit. So good job on them. We've mentioned it before, but Wilmington being the hotbed of filming that was in the 90s, that's pre-incentive world. I kind of feel like that's maybe I could do a whole episode on Wilmington, maybe. I'll look into it. We'll see. But as far as the shoot goes, it had been a good shoot. They were almost done. They were 52 days in on a 60-day shoot. And by all accounts I read, Brandon was a delight to work with. He was young, passionate, very dedicated to the shoot. He was friendly with the crew. He was accommodating to production. By everything I read and have heard, he seemed like a genuinely good guy, which is why he had to die, because good people get killed. Anyway, I'm kidding. But as we all know, assholes don't die. But if you would look, Zoe, in this next little thing, I found a snippet where the producer, Jeff Most, reflects on working with Brandon.
Okay, so this is what Most says about Brandon. He exemplified all those beautiful qualities in an individual. He was smart, he was intuitive, he was so masterful about understanding himself in relation to this role and what he wanted to bring to it, and literally throwing out all of his training in martial arts, which was significant and tremendous. He wanted to create his own language of movement because he understood this character. This was not a martial artist. He's a musician. He's a guy who has never probably gotten into a fight in his life, and yet he comes back with this tremendous power and a mission. Brandon tried to envision a mental approach to how he could create this individual who at once has to do these horrible things, and yet it's the furthest thing from anything that would have been in the persona of the character while they were alive. It was an incredible, artful, and intentionally thought out performance. That's what is so resonant with people today. Most being Jeff Most, remembers how each day Brandon Lee would wake up at 5:30 a.m., starve himself and work out. Given the character, Lee insisted on learning how to play the guitar. So Jeff Most found a teacher for him in Wilmington. You couldn't throw more things at the man, and he took it all in like a sponge. Aw, Brandon Lee.
I know.
I didn't realize that was Bruce Lee,
son of Bruce.
Yeah, Bruce Lee's son. I had no idea. That's
Which
sad.
Is why I guess we technically weren't recording when Justin said that, but that's where we were on there with the conspiracy part of it, because when Bruce Lee died, there was a lot of conspiracy theory that it wasn't an accident, that someone had foul play was involved.
Okay.
So part of Brandon's tragic death on set kind of reignited that whole conspiracy theory world, which is why you get sort of a round two of it, or if not conspiracy, just curse talk. That the Lee family is cursed. So all of that.
I love a good curse.
Yeah, who doesn't?
The Lees don't.
Yeah. Fair enough. Very fair. Very fair point. It just brought all that back up to the surface. 20 whatever years later.
Yeah.
So what happened? Let's get into it. The most important thing, and again, why it would have been great to have Chris with us. The most important fact about this tragedy is what it changed in our industry all the way to the present, essentially, and Russ specifically, which is fascinating, as you're going to see. So, as I had already said, 52 days into shooting, on March 31st, 1993, they were shooting the flashback assault scenes. Michael Massey, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, or Massey, he's the actor who played the character Fun Boy, one of the gang members. He was given the prop gun for the scene. I'm not sure what the original plan was for the scene. I was finding out from a few different sources that they had something different planned, and for whatever reason it got changed. Like Fun Boy wasn't supposed to be one of the shooters originally. So what's kind of interesting is that whatever led them to make the change or whatever, and then, you know, having the conversation with the actor and saying like, are you comfortable doing this? And he's like, yeah, you know, I'm sure you said something along the lines of whatever you need me to do, you know, something like that. And then for this to end the way it did, it's like, oh my God, the poor guy, you know, or what about the other guy that was supposed to be the, you know.
Yeah.
So a lot of happenstance in there. But he was given the gun when Eric Draven, Brandon's character, when he comes into the apartment, he's holding a bag of groceries. And the effects department had put a squib in the prop bag of groceries. And Justin, do you want to talk about a squib for a second?
Sure. I mean, as much as I can.
Well, part of it ties into sound. If you're talking wires and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a little crossover there.
Yeah. I mean, it's a device that essentially explodes. Not. I mean, that's a strong word, I guess.
It's a pop, I guess.
Yeah, it pops open.
Yeah.
And sometimes
so
excretes
yes,
blood-like liquid.
So if you, to your point, if you are, maybe you're doing an action movie and classic 80s action, and you think of like a guy's got a machine gun and he shoots multiple people, you see that blood coming off of all the people getting shot. Those are squibs popping off, and with the little charge, it will be like a little bag of blood. So when the charge goes off, it's making that blood come out, being the liquid that you were just referring to for that. But squibs, by effects, have multiple purposes, and it's a very useful item that can do different things. But a lot of times it's simulating that projectile of a gun that's not there. And so in this case, it's the bag of groceries is popping off to give the simulation as if the bullet went through the bag of groceries to hit him. So that's the idea, at least.
And yes, we don't like when our microphones are close to these things.
I would imagine not.
Because they're loud.
Because it's loud.
Because it's loud. I guess it'd be kind of situational, but do you try, if they're switching to squib, do y'all go like, well, maybe we want to boom this if we can or something?
Yeah.
Just to try to get the wires away from.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, a lot of times. And, you know, I mean, if it's a squib that's not close to a wire, then we'll keep it on and just turn it down.
You're right, exactly.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that dummy rounds didn't officially exist yet in 1994. That was one of the things I learned on this. So, which I'm now curious what they were doing before this, and I don't think it was necessarily what they did to make the dummy rounds. But essentially, it is a little shocking when I was reading this. But as just a quick refresher, dummy rounds are the bullet rounds that look exactly like real ammo, but they're hollow on the inside. They just put a couple of BBs inside, so when we shake them, we hear the rattle. That's how we know it's a dummy round. But otherwise, the primer's been spent on the back. They look like a real bullet in every other way, and we use those for purposes of when we need to see ammo on set. But, you know, let's say, for example, maybe someone's wearing a bandolier, you know, so you can put a bunch of dummy rounds in it, so you know it's safe, but it also looks like they got an ammo belt. Or maybe they're loading or unloading a magazine. You know, there's situations where you want to have these dummy rounds, but also be safe and keep anything that has actual gunpowder in it far away from the actor. So what they did on this show, which is interesting, there's an effects technician named Bruce Merlin, and he was assisted by Daniel Kuttner, who was the prop master. They were dismantling live rounds, removing the bullet, so it's just like the shell casing, dumping the gunpowder, hitting the primer, you know, spinning it, and then reassembling it back together. So basically a homemade dummy is what they were putting together. And, you know, I would need to talk to somebody a little older than me that was in the industry in the early 90s and before that maybe could speak a little better to it. But I was just surprised that, I mean, already at this point in the 90s, you would think something like this would already exist or be standard, but apparently not, because why else would they be doing it?
Yeah.
So this is where these episodes for us are a little bit like Crime Junkies. If anyone ever listens to Crime Junkies, I'm just going off of what I can find on the internet.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, like, so we talked a little bit about how we had heard different versions of the stories. I had heard that they were shooting in two different units, which I wasn't able to find anything that confirmed that. All I could find was that the gun was used earlier in the day in a different scene. And in whatever scene they were doing earlier in the day, they were putting dummy rounds into the gun. And at some point, while that weapon had the homemade dummy rounds in it, a trigger must have been pulled or something, because the determination was that one of these homemade rounds, the primer maybe wasn't, the primer was still active, and there was enough residual gunpowder to push the bullet forward a little bit. So basically it got into the barrel of the gun. Now, for example, when you were mentioning shrapnel and things like that, there is a little bit of confusion as far as what was lodged in the barrel. So it might have been remnants of that, or it could have been the whole thing. There's not a lot of clarity on that. But what's interesting about this period of time in our industry, we didn't do weapon clearance at this time. So this movie is the reason why we put flashlights in barrels to show that the barrel's clear, and what all of our protocols come from this movie, which I sort of knew, but kind of deep diving into this, it was more of a confirmation. So what's interesting is that if you want to say something positive from this tragedy, it's that, you know, our safety protocols sort of got cemented and, how can I say, they got streamlined across the industry. So didn't matter what show you're on in what state or whatever, you're still going through the same safety protocols. And when this gun gets to set, it is now being loaded with our regular flash ammo, our flashbangs, or not flashbangs. What am I talking about? Anyway, but I'm assuming, because it was an interior shot in kind of a tight space, they probably were using a quarter load. They might have been using a half load at most. And that normally harmless round, it's harmless because it doesn't have a projectile. The bullet's been removed. The tips are crimped. And it's just for the purpose of the bang or the flash of the muzzle flash coming out. So what happens in this situation is that normally harmless load became the catalyst to fire what's now a projectile of what was lodged in the barrel of the gun. So when the actor Michael Massey, when he fires, what's emitting from the gun is more or less a projectile. And so it hits him in his right abdomen, and the squib goes off on the grocery bag, and they say cut, and everything seems like it went really well because he went to the ground like he's supposed to, and, you know, the squib goes off. It looked great.
He acted like he got shot.
Yeah. It was the stunt coordinator who was the first to say, hey, something's not right, when he realizes, A, he's not getting up, and B, he's noticing he had labored breathing. And at first, they couldn't see anything obvious, and there was no blood that was obvious. So they're like, maybe the squib did something, you know, because it's right next to him. They're not thinking that the gun did something, because that was like 20 feet away.
Yeah.
So they're trying to figure out like what's going on as they are kind of getting the costume off and everything, now they're seeing the blood. Now they're realizing, oh shit, so ambulance is coming, he's going to the hospital. They worked on him throughout the night, I believe, and I want to say around 1 something in the afternoon the next day he passed. The projectile had done way more damage than what was originally assumed. It went in his side. It spun a loop, like a loop-de-loop, and then eventually it lodges in his spine, and that's after it had cut 2 arteries and it had hit some major organs. So I'm not sure, even if the accident happened in a hospital next to an operating table, if it would have, if they would have been able to save him. And it's there's no other way to say it than it's a tragedy. It's something that, obviously we make movies, we're meant to entertain. You don't want these kind of things to happen. And tragedies are just a reality that happens sometimes. With this particular case, because it was sort of unprecedented, it's why we now had all these safety protocols and things put into place. It's not going to be shocking to anyone, but it also was sort of the end for a lot of people that worked on it, including the actor. Michael Massey barely acted again after this, and there was an interview he actually passed away in 2015. He was only 61. But he, in an interview reflecting on this, he had said, it's not really something you ever get over. And it's like, no, I imagine not. He probably had gotten friendly with Brandon and everything like that. And I mean, you can only imagine.
Sure, yeah. It's not like he's a cop or something, like sees this all the time. He's an actor.
Right. Like, I pretend to kill.
Yeah.
I'm not... But, I mean, just really shocking, I think, for those involved. And getting into a little bit about, well, actually, first I'll say that the Wilmington police did an investigation, and even though no charges were filed, it was ultimately declared an accident due to negligence, and they just kind of left it at that. One thing that's interesting about that is you fast forward all the way to Rust, and the same determination has happened, but they are out for culpability. They want a guilty party. Yeah. Where in this situation, they're going, it's a horrible tragedy. It's nobody's fault specifically.
Do better.
Do better. Yeah. But to put a little bit of onus on something, I'm going to put it on the production itself, because we encounter this more often than we should, but we can get swept up in the demands of the project. It can be combined, that those demands can be combined with a lack of maybe time, maybe pressure to be ready by a certain time, and now you're rushing to get to that readiness. There could be a lack of safety protocols, but all these things are what led to that accident. It's not that anyone was neglecting their own job as so much as it was, this is going at a fast pace. Every time I've ever heard this story, it was very go, go, go. Mm-hmm. It was very fast paced. Guns are exchanging hands. You need communication, you need safety things. One thing that was interesting about this, I couldn't find where there was like specifically an armorer. And I did find that there was, I think his name was James. I put it further down. It was, where's he at? They had here it is. The company had hired a freelance firearms consultant, which I've never heard of that like consulting title. But maybe that's an older world of safety rules that have altered because of this show. Yeah. I mean, nowadays the armor is always present when there's gunplay. It's just a mandatory thing. And if you're ever on a show that they're trying to say, no, we don't need it, you always argue, yes, we do. Yeah. And unfortunately / fortunately, we can point to things like this and say, this is why we need this. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But one thing that's just a random aside about that guy, the freelance firearms consultant, he had been dismissed earlier that day, on that particular day of the shooting, because they had declared it a routine gun scene. So we won't need you. Now, what did he do exactly as a consultant? That I don't know. Or could he have done something differently? I don't know.
Yeah, looked in the gun, I guess.
That's a lot of speculation there. So the studio and the producers found creative ways to ultimately finish the movie. They had, after the tragedy, they went down for several days while they kind of regrouped and kind of reassessed everything. But they did ultimately finish the movie, and it was a success. It's not something we're going to go into, but it is worth going into if you're curious. It is very interesting what they did with the technology at the time to complete the movie. Another fun random aside is his stuntman, Chad Stahelski. I'll see it when I read it.
Yep.
Anyway, that stuntman, or his stunt double, I mean, he is who went on to finish the movie basically as Eric Draven. So they were
okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
They were using certain repeating shots, flipping images, cutting and pasting essentially with 1990s tech. But that stunt double, he goes on to eventually be the director of the John Wick movies. So I thought that was kind of an interesting, and the John Wick movies are very clear about not having real weapons on the set. They work around it. They use the fake VFX muzzle flashes and stuff.
Yeah.
And eventually,
Everything looks great in those.
yeah,
John Wick rules.
and I'm glad you said that, because I was just about to say, as technology improves, using real guns will eventually be a moot point. And where we are right now, kind of to the point of what Justin just said, John Wick has a lot of money. So with a lot of money, you can afford good VFX. Where you see the need for live fire is where maybe you don't have money for VFX and you don't want it to look cheesy.
Yeah.
I always think of the like a TV show where they say it's a house fire, but it's very clear that the flames have been superimposed onto a very okay house.
Yep.
It looks so bad. But this is a thing, as technology improves, it'll sort of solve the safety issue altogether on its own. Now, in the case of Rust, you still have the mystery of how real ammo got on a film set to begin with. That's a whole other can of worms. But with this, we are heading in that direction. So I think it is a good thing. And eventually it will be, where maybe a TV series or a lower budget movie will be able to have the capability to replicate like a bigger budget show like a John Wick could.
Yeah.
So the safety protocols that were put into place after this have had almost 30 years of more or less being successful in preventing accidents. There's very few accidents that are this level of tragedy. And again, it's because some protocol wasn't followed or some kind of, and those are, some of those we'll get into on future episodes. But for this, I mean, that's just, again, why the Rust shooting was so avoidable, because, you had to violate so many things to get to that tragedy. And kind of getting us into a wrap up here. I know that we and other people have described the Rust shooting as a perfect storm. Do y'all feel that this was a perfect storm, or do you feel that, this is truly just an accident at its core? I mean, there's certainly ways to go about looking at it.
I mean, the Rust thing, is a totally different thing. This
That's
sounds
like 14 violations in one.
Yeah, I mean, also Rust, that happened, just a few years ago, maybe between 2020 and 23, something like that. I can't really remember.
No, it's been longer than we think. It was like 21 now.
Okay, yeah. So it's been a few years. All the right protocols were in place. It's like, okay, 1993. That sounds like that's just how they did it, and yeah, it was an accident. It doesn't sound like there were the protocol of like, I mean, gosh, we'll have this fake ass gun that can't shoot a gun, and crew asks us to look down the barrel or whatever. It doesn't sound like any of that was in place.
No.
That I'm like, it just sounds like a kind of horrible, fucked up thing that.
Because there weren't rampant accidents. Yeah, there weren't rampant accidents happening before this even.
Yeah.
It's not like you go to the 80s, 70s, or 60s or something like that, and you're hearing about like widespread.
Sure, it's like a common thing. That just happens.
Yeah. So, it really does feel like it was just a very unfortunate accident. And, until we can actually interview somebody that was there, I think this is as close as we can get to try to see, what was avoidable and what wasn't for the time period, I say that in the sense of like, if the protocols aren't there, then it's not necessarily avoidable.
Yeah.
It happened because this wasn't there. And so I would be curious, like what was considered the safety of the time. That would be kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what this firearms consultant was.
Yeah. What do they do?
I mean, I'd be willing to bet that, he might have been blowing some whistles and they were like, yeah, you can go home for today.
Which it wouldn't be the first time I've seen a
sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Especially whenever you hear the term tech consultant, which is
consultants.
Not exactly what this person may have been, but oftentimes tech consultant, like Zoe on NCIS, we always had a military, it was a Coast Guard or
I remember
Navy.
that dude, yeah.
Yeah, and so that's our tech consultant.
Yeah.
And using NCIS actually as an example, that person doing their job is to say, the Navy wouldn't do this in this situation. And then...
Right, it's really more about like lingo and how they stand or greet each other. There's kind of just like...
the consultant's supposed to be helping you bring the realism to it. The problem is that you're on a network procedural like NCIS New Orleans, and they don't care that much. And so I always felt bad for the consultants, because a lot of times they'd be like, yeah, that's great. Okay, let's do what we're going to do anyway. And then you're like, well, wait, why do you have the consultant here? Because now you're making him look bad.
Oh, you're still here? You can go home, man.
Yeah, whatever. That dude's getting paid for the day.
We got the notes. Boats have things on them. Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
That boat should be in water?
Yeah. Boats are on the water, not land. Got it.
Yeah. Clean the gun. I got it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a fair question to ask. I mean, I don't know if freelance firearms consultant is the term for armor before we were saying armor, or is this a guy sitting at Village in a chair just going like, yep, that's a gun.
Yeah.
I'll be in the bathroom.
Yeah.
But no, you're holding it upside down.
It's a fair question. So Justin, I had a thing here for you to read, because I thought this was interesting as well. This is another aside as far as now. The only account I could find was from his co-star, as Justin's about to read. But I mean, there's no reason for her to lie. So I'm just curious how this whole thing played out. But go ahead and read, Justin.
Sure. According to Lee's co-star, Sophia Shinas told Most that Lee had rejected advice to wear a flak jacket because he thought it would be visible on camera. She turned to him and said, "You have got to wear the flak jacket." And he said, "No, look, I'm not worried. If it's my time to go, it's my time to go home." Of course, had he worn the flak jacket, it probably would have prevented the fatal wound.
Oh, whack, dude.
So
People with that attitude, though, are kind of like, why do you have that? If it's my time to go, it's my time to go.
That's what there's. Like I said, she doesn't have any reason to lie. There is some oddness.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, that was
Justin's got a gun now.
Justin, a gun just fell out of. Okay. So there's a couple of things that are odd here. I don't know of flak jackets being common to put underneath costumes on sets. Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess that's more of a stunts question. Maybe they do for certain situations, and I just haven't paid attention over the years. But I could be wrong, but it does feel a little bit odd that he was offered a flak jacket and then to continue, and he actually quotes, or he is quoted as saying, like, if it's my time to go, it's my time to go. And it's like, well, that's ominous. Like,
Yeah.
like,
By flak. So I'm flak jacket is bulletproof vest.
essentially it's a
Okay.
bulletproof vest. Yeah. It's a jacket that has particular material inside.
Yeah, like
that
Teflon or something.
yeah. And they have like metal plates sometimes.
Yeah.
And,
That sucks though too. I think an older actor might have, but it sounds like this dude is pretty young. 28.
28. He's like, if
Never
it's my
gonna
time to
die.
go.
Yeah, you want
Yeah.
to do the best in the scene. Like, we'll see. It'll look bad. No, nothing. What,
I just
what
learned to
could
play
happen
guitar.
me?
What could go
Literally feeling invincible.
Yeah, yeah.
wrong? I mean, no one dies right before they're 30. Anyway,
Especially actors.
especially
Yeah, yeah.
actors and musicians. Chad Stahelski. Now that I'm looking at his
I
name
think
again.
Stalsky.
Stalsky, sure.
Well, I don't know.
Chad, will you write us? Tell us how to say your name. So, which I actually have seen him in John Wick interview talking about decision on guns and stuff and everything. He does seem like a really cool guy. And, I mean, talk about pivotal in his career to have been here for this entire thing. And then, almost 3 decades later, you're now directing a franchise that's heavy gunplay.
Yeah.
So interesting. So the last thing, and maybe Justin, if you'd read this as well, we're back to our producer, Jeff Most. He actually knew Helena Hutchins, and he spoke to the Rust tragedy as someone who knew her and also having been producer for The Crow. I thought he had a really interesting take on it was his opinion on the aftermath of Rust, which clearly was not shared by the prosecution. But Justin, do you mind reading that?
Yeah. Most reflects, I'm brokenhearted at the loss of Helena. She was a friend to me as well as my wife, who is a cinematographer. We met Helena shortly after she was out of AFI, that's American Film Institute. She was a dear, wonderful woman, somebody we very much had designs on working with. You want to look at the silver linings of what can be learned in situations, and certainly what was learned in the loss of Brandon was a routine formula of checking the barrel of a gun to make sure that there is no bullet, no protrusion of any sort, that the barrel is clean and clear and is held to the light. And a practice in which the first assistant director, oftentimes the key grip, and the prop master are all involved with the actor in making a certain weapon is cold when it's cold, is hot when it's hot, and there is nothing in the barrel or chamber that could be ejected. To see that in the almost 30 years between the movies, we hadn't improved upon that was certainly devastating. I will say that I find it tragic and beyond belief that Alec Baldwin has been held any bit responsible for this. As a producer with more than 30 years experience and numerous action films under his belt, I can assure you that there is no place in the world in which an actor is responsible for the weapon they're handling. Most concludes, there's no place for anything but absolute safety on a set, and it all brought back memories of the terrible tragedy with the loss of Brandon. It should not have been repeated, and I hope it won't ever be again.
And I mean, just my opinion, but I think he's absolutely right. I mean, we've sort of said it more or less in the Rust coverage, but by that time that weapon's getting to the actor, I don't think it's the actor's fault. They got a lot of stuff going on in their head that they're thinking about right before the camera rolls, their dialogue, their actions, the movement, what they're doing with the prop, if that's involved. And they rely on those safety protocols and the crew to do their job. to deliver that thing safely to them so that they can carry out their end of the deal as it is.
That's the whole thing with actors too. There's a process. You don't want to weigh them down with too much stuff. You don't want them thinking too hard. Besides the thing they need to be.
You can load us down with whatever you want.
Yeah, but like with actors, I mean that's the whole thing too. Like that's why you shouldn't be talking to an actor too much, especially if they have like a serious scene. They're doing their.
Can you imagine if one of us let's say Justin's mixing and like I'm a producer and I come to him and I'm like, hey, next take we need it, and then Justin just cuts off going like, I got too much on my plate right now. You're in my eye line, by the way.
This is not a part of my process. Yeah. I have a process and I'm getting there.
I have a process and you're fucking with it right now.
I know some mixers who will do that.
Well, that's true.
I love when sound gets mad.
Yeah, it happens.
Yeah. They're
scary.
Sound...
Not me. I won't.
Sound needs to get mad sometimes, rightfully so. I will defend part of that.
Justin's got a gun right now.
Yeah, as we just established.
He's holding it to Jetson.
And he keeps dropping it, which is obviously not. I tell you what's not a safety protocol is dropping guns. So
how do you hold this thing?
I've gotten in the habit of because of post Rust world, and there's a lot of and it's justified. It's just annoying on our end, but when we're clearing weapons and stuff, there's a lot more attention than ever to it, and so you get a lot of kind of going all the way back to our first episode on Rust, and I alluded to a certain crew member that always asks for a weapon safety check after we've done it multiple times, and it's very annoying. But it's like I get it. And at the same time, there's a reality of things where, like for me, I've found over the years, if you do like a lighthearted joke and a couple of reassuring things, that's usually enough to get yourself out of this conversation and move on with what you actually need to do. So you in this situation, maybe you say like, there is no ammo of any kind. Whether you want to say real, live, fake, dummy, this is just an expensive paperweight. That's what this is. It can't do anything unless I hit you with it. So there's absolutely no form of ammo anywhere to be found. This is simply a cold weapon, as we have checked, and there is no chance of it doing anything beyond that. And that should be enough to satisfy that. So now I can go and do actual work things.
Yeah, go around pistol whipping people.
Yeah. And then I show you like, see, it hurts. This is why you don't use it as a hammer. But yeah, I think, if you want to talk about positives from this, you got up until Rust, like we said, almost 30 years of more or less safety. There's a couple of, and we'll get into them, like I said, on future episodes, but I do know of a couple of specific instances, and interestingly, they're things that were told to me by, my mentors or predecessors, whatever you want to say. And again, like that game of telephone, when I started looking into them, I'm like, oh, this has to be what he was talking about, but it is different from the way I was, it was explained to me, But it'd be things like I was told it was on the set of a soap opera, but it was actually a TV action series. And it's like, I mean, they're both TV, so there's that. But they really are few and far between. So I think the protocols that got put in place, as long as you're following them, they're doing their job. And as we have beat that dead horse, that's what they didn't do on Rust. I also just worked, I'm going to tell you all this. I just worked with an actor that had worked with the AD from Rust.
Oh, yeah?
Not on Rust, but on a different show before Rust. And they were polite, but they just said that was just that dude's thing. He was...
Not cool.
Safety issues followed that dude.
Yeah.
So, as we have kind of tiptoed around. But anywho's... let's get out of here on this. Any final thoughts to the Crow? I know this is a little different from our legendary lores that I actually explained the movie synopsis, which is not something I do often on these. But I mean, does this pique your interest, Zoe, that you're curious to go check it out?
The Crow?
Yeah.
Yeah, The Crow's on the list.
Yeah. Oh,
It's been on the list.
you know what? I didn't even factor this in. She's not there time-wise.
Yeah, far from it.
Oh, God. Why did I even ask?
Yeah,
What are you
so
in the 40s right now? 50s?
yes.
I'm in the dickities. That's all you need to know.
Yeah. But no, yeah, the Crow's been on the list for a while, you know.
The leader of I can't think of the actor's name offhand, but the leader of the gang, he's been in so many things. But I mean, like in the Warriors, he's the clinking the bottles, like Warriors, come out and play. That's that guy. He's got that unique voice that's sort of Southern sounding, and it's got that twang to it. And I don't know. Anytime he shows up, I'm always like, "Ooh, I like that guy." He's Sully in Commando. You remember when I said I'd kill you last, Sully? That's right, Matrix. I lied.
I was trying to look him up. I can't.
Anyway, but you got this really cool cast. You got this interesting movie, and it's just, it's unfortunate. I do wonder, Brandon Lee's career, had this not happened, would he have blown up into like major action star like his dad, or
Would he just done some things that we know?
Maybe maybe this would have been his peak. I don't know. Yeah. He certainly had the foundation, though. I mean, not just the pedigree, I guess you could say, but I mean, he was being groomed to do what he was doing. I mean, like in that quote that y'all read, he had been studying martial arts, his whole life. It's like, you're the child of Bruce Lee. You're going to be taking martial arts classes.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're also going to be taking theater classes. You're also going to be doing, so he was basically being groomed to be an action star in kind of a weird sense of it.
Was his dad alive when he passed?
He was 8 years old, I believe, when his dad died.
Oh, okay.
So,
Gotcha.
I mean, he knew him.
Yeah.
But
Interesting.
yeah.
I guess we'll never know. We'll never crow.
Oh,
There we go.
smells like a fart in this room.
Give me the gun. Give me the gun.
It's a big plate of cheese you're holding there. All right, Justin, any thoughts?
No, I can't top that one.
Okay. Well, in that case, Zoe, I think you only got one other thing to say.
Yeah, I got something to say. Do you like what we're doing here? Do you have thoughts, comments, questions? Maybe you have an idea or suggestion for topics you want to hear about? Well, you can find us on the intrawebs. You can email us at filmfolklorepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on the social medias, Instagram being Film Folklore Podcast. We have a Facebook group called Film Folklore, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, @The Film Folk. And yeah, thanks for joining us today.
All right, thanks, everyone.
Bye.